Imagine a punishment so horrific it wasn't just meant to kill a man, but to completely erase him from existence. Picture this. A man's limbs are tied to 4 powerful horses, ready to be ripped from his body in front of a screaming, bloodthirsty crowd. This was the real-life fate of François Ravaillac, an assassin who truly believed he was on a mission from God. For the crime of killing a king, the state designed a spectacle of agony so brutal it would be burned into France's memory forever. So what pushed this man to murder his king, and what was the terrifying message behind his gruesome end? To get why the crime happened, you have to understand the criminal. François Ravaillac was born in 1578 in Angoulême, France, into a world torn apart by violent religious wars. His family's social standing was shaky. His grandfather had been a respected prosecutor, but his own father was a violent man whose bad habits and legal troubles ruined the family financially. Amid this chaos, young François was raised by his deeply religious mother and 2 uncles who were canons at the local cathedral. They taught him to read and write, but they also filled him with a profound Catholic faith and a deep-seated hatred for the Protestants, or Huguenots, who were challenging the old order. This mix of a chaotic home life and intense piety created a man desperate for a purpose. Ravaillac was an outcast who always felt like he was on the outside looking in. Obsessed with religion, he wanted nothing more than to dedicate his life to God. He tried to join the Feuillants, a strict Catholic order, but was quickly kicked out. The monks found him too strange, too unstable, describing him as a man who was prey to visions. In 1606, he tried to join the Jesuits, but was rejected again. Being turned away by the very institutions he worshipped only seemed to fuel his fanaticism. If the church wouldn't have him, he'd find his own way to serve God. And in his mind, that path was becoming terrifyingly clear. Since he was young, Ravaillac had been tormented by mystical visions. He claimed to see tongues of fire, hear divine whispers, and smell the sulfur of the devil. His psychological instability, fed by the extremist rhetoric of the time, soon fixated on a single person, King Henry IV of France. In 1609, Ravaillac claimed a powerful vision commanded him to force the king to convert all French Huguenots to Catholicism. He no longer saw himself as a failed teacher or a rejected monk, but as an instrument of God, an avenging angel on a sacred mission. The target of Ravaillac's obsession, King Henry IV, was one of the most important and complicated figures in French history. Born a Protestant, Henry of Navarre had fought for years in the brutal French wars of religion. He barely escaped with his life during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572, a week-long slaughter of Protestants in Paris. When he became heir to the throne in 1589, he inherited a bitterly divided kingdom where the Catholic majority refused to accept a Protestant king. Henry IV was, above all, a pragmatist. Realizing he could never unite France as a Protestant, he converted to Catholicism in 1593. It's famously said he quipped that Paris is worth a mass, and while the quote might be a legend, the sentiment was real. This move, while politically brilliant, didn't fully satisfy anyone. To many Protestants, he was a traitor. To hardline Catholics, he was a fake. Still, he became known as Good King Henry for working tirelessly to heal the nation. His greatest achievement was the Edict of Nantes in 1598. This revolutionary decree granted Protestants significant rights in a Catholic country, including freedom of conscience, the right to worship publicly in certain places, and even the right to maintain their own fortified towns for protection. It was a radical act of religious tolerance for its time, designed to end decades of war. But for fanatics like François Ravaillac, the Edict of Nantes wasn't peace. It was a betrayal. It was an official acceptance of heresy in the sacred kingdom of France. This anger boiled over in 1610. Henry IV was preparing to intervene militarily in a complex dispute over German lands, supporting Protestant claimants against the Catholic Habsburg dynasty, a political move to counter France's main rival. But zealots like Ravaillac heard only one thing. The King of France was about to wage war against a Catholic power. In their minds, this was an attack on the Pope himself. For Ravaillac, this was the final straw. The king, he decided, was an enemy of God, and his divine mission was no longer to convert him, but to kill him. Convinced of his holy purpose, Ravaillac set off for Paris, a man possessed. Between 1609 and 1610, he traveled to the city 3 times, trying to get an audience with the king to deliver his divine warning. He never got close. His frantic energy and wild-eyed look probably made sure of that. His failure only hardened his resolve. He started stalking the king, learning his routines, watching his movements, and waiting for his chance. He became an ominous, red-bearded figure, lurking in the shadows of the Louvre, consumed by a single, violent idea. That moment finally came on May 14, 1610. The day was already heavy with a sense of doom. The king's wife, Marie de Medici, had just been crowned queen, and an astrologer had warned Henry the day was dangerous. Despite this, the king decided to visit his sick minister, the Duke of Sully. Traveling with only minimal protection, he set off from the Louvre in his carriage. Around 4 in the afternoon, the royal carriage turned onto the narrow, crowded Rue de la Ferronnerie. Suddenly, it was stuck. 2 large carts, one filled with wine, the other with hay, blocked the street, forcing the king's carriage to a dead stop. Ravaillac had been following. This was it, his divine opportunity. He leaped onto one of the carriage wheels. Through the open window, he plunged a long, double-edged knife into the king. The first blow reportedly struck Henry in the arm or armpit. The king cried out, "I am wounded!" Before anyone could react, Ravaillac struck again, a vicious second thrust between the ribs that, according to most accounts, severed the aorta and proved fatal. A wild third stab only managed to slash the sleeve of another passenger. Chaos erupted. Blood poured from the king's mouth. He slumped over, dead within moments. Ravaillac didn't even try to run. He just stood there by the carriage, knife in hand, as if waiting for whatever came next. The stunned crowd quickly seized him. He was rushed to the nearby Hotel de Retz, partly to protect him from the mob that wanted to tear him to pieces right then and there. Good King Henry was dead, and the full, terrifying power of the French state was about to come down on his killer. Assassinating a king isn't just murder. It's an attack on the soul of a nation. News of Henry's death sent shockwaves across Europe. It plunged France into a political crisis, leaving the throne to his 9-year-old son, Louis XIII, and instantly reigniting fears of a new civil war between Catholics and Protestants. Amid the chaos, the authorities had one burning question. Did Ravaillac act alone? He was taken to the grim conciergerie prison and interrogated for days. The Parliament of Paris was desperate to uncover a conspiracy. He was subjected to horrific judicial torture with instruments designed to break a man's body and shatter his will. But his story never changed. He insisted again and again that he had no accomplices. God and God alone was his co-conspirator. "I know very well he is dead," he told them. "I saw the blood on my knife, but I have no regrets at all about dying because I've done what I came to do." Despite his denials, rumors of a plot flew. Suspicion fell on powerful figures who might have wanted the king gone. Some pointed to the Duke of Épernon, who was in the carriage with the king but, according to some witnesses, did nothing to protect him. It was also alleged that Ravaillac had, at one point, lodged with Épernon's mistress, fueling the speculation. Even the newly powerful Queen Regent, Marie de Medici, was whispered about. The theories suggested Ravaillac was just a pawn, a fanatical, useful idiot used by powerful people to get rid of a king they despised. But no hard evidence of a conspiracy has ever been found. After a 10-day trial, the Parliament of Paris officially found Ravaillac guilty of regicide and declared he had acted alone. But a simple execution wasn't enough. Killing God's chosen monarch required a punishment that was about ritual, symbolism, and absolute terror. The state had to make an example of François Ravaillac to stage a public spectacle of suffering so extreme that no one would ever forget it. The day of execution was May 27, 1610. The stage was the Place de Grève, Paris's traditional execution site, which was about to become an open-air theater of horror. A massive, hysterical crowd gathered, with people paying huge sums for a window or rooftop spot with a good view. The day's grim ceremony began in front of Notre Dame Cathedral. Barefoot and wearing only a simple shirt, Ravaillac was forced to make a public apology, holding a large lit candle as he confessed his monstrous crime. From there, he was thrown into a garbage cart for the humiliating ride to the Place de Grève. There, the real torment began. The punishment for regicide was a carefully choreographed series of agonies meant to destroy the body piece by piece while keeping the victim conscious for as long as possible. First, his right hand, the hand that held the dagger, was clamped and plunged into a fire of burning sulfur. The crowd watched as his flesh blackened and burned. Next, executioners used iron pincers to tear chunks of flesh from his chest, arms, and thighs. According to detailed narrative accounts, they then poured a searing mixture of molten lead, boiling oil, scalding resin, and melted wax and sulfur into the gaping wounds. The goal was pure, unimaginable pain. Through all of this, Ravaillac screamed and prayed, still alive, his body a canvas for the state's revenge. But the grand finale was yet to come. His arms and legs were tied with thick ropes to 4 strong horses. The executioners drove the horses in opposite directions, intending to tear him apart. But according to some eyewitness accounts, Ravaillac's body wouldn't give. The horses pulled and strained, but his joints held firm, prolonging the agony. The crowd grew restless and angry. Finally, the executioners had to step in, using knives to hack at his limbs to help the horses finish the job. At last, his body was ripped asunder. The crowd, which had been watching in horrified fascination, exploded into a frenzy. They surged past the guards, grabbing the dismembered parts of his body. What remained was burned at the stake, and the ashes were scattered to the winds, a symbolic act to ensure not a single trace of the regicide remained on earth. A Polish nobleman named Jakub Sobieski, who was there, later wrote about the shocking aftermath, reporting that some in the crowd took pieces of the corpse home. His account even included a story of one man frying and eating the flesh in a final, terrifying act of public rage. The state's vengeance didn't stop with Ravaillac's death. The punishment was meant to be absolute, to wipe out not just the man, but his entire family and memory from France. The Parliament of Paris issued a final chilling decree. Ravaillac's parents were exiled, banished from the kingdom forever on pain of death if they ever returned. The rest of his family was ordered to stop using the name Ravaillac. The very house where he was born in Angoulême was to be demolished, razed to the ground, with a decree that no building could ever be built on that cursed spot again. It was a complete, symbolic obliteration. This brutal spectacle served a clear purpose. In an age where the king's body was a sacred symbol of the nation, regicide was the ultimate crime. The execution was a ritualistic display of the state's terrifying power, a graphic message that an attack on the king was an attack on France and would be met with unimaginable ferocity. It was meant to reinforce royal power and scare off anyone else who might get similar ideas. In the end, though, Henry IV's assassination did exactly what he had worked so hard to prevent. It kicked off a period of political instability and reignited the bitter tensions between Catholics and Protestants that good King Henry had tried so desperately to heal. François Ravaillac thought he was an agent of God sent to purify France. Instead, he plunged it back into crisis. His name, despite the state's best efforts, was not forgotten. It lived on as a byword for fanaticism and the centerpiece of one of history's most horrific public executions, a chilling reminder of the terrifying intersection of religious extremism and absolute state power. If you want to explore more of the darkest chapters from history, be sure to subscribe to Ancient Vault and click the notification bell. Let us know in the comments which historical execution or dark event you think we should investigate next. The story of François Ravaillac is more than just a tale of a madman and a murdered king. It's a stark reminder of how fervent belief can curdle into deadly obsession, and how the power of the state, when threatened, can unleash a form of vengeance that is as symbolic as it is savage. The ashes of Ravaillac were scattered to the winds over 400 years ago, but his story remains a powerful and disturbing echo from the past, a warning of the brutal consequences that unfold when faith and power collide.